Serious men of Reddit, we hear all about horror stories about how crazy men can be when rejected, but what's been your crazy experience when you rejected a woman? Does after a breakup count? If so, I was graduating from my masters, had a low self-esteem and my ex was really hinting that she wanted to get married. I didn't, was super clear on that point. She broke it off right before I went to visit my parents for about a week. I was a bit bummed out on the way home, and a couple of days after, then she called and said she wanted to talk when I got back. By then, I had the feeling she would want to get back together if we got engaged or married. And that's exactly what happened. When I got back she acted like everything is fine and talking about us getting serious. After that we went, sat down and told her it was over. I was pissed. She was suicidal. She even ran to the kitchen and got a knife and threatened to slit her wrists. I pulled the knife away after getting cut myself and locked her in my bathroom where nothing sharp was there and called a friend of mine to give us a ride so I can leave her at her house. At that point I didn't want to leave her at a cab and act crazy and missing or something. That's not the end of it. It had just begun. Next morning I woke up to 30 texts and 5 missed calls. I decided to ignore them. It escalated to 40 a day and 20 missed calls for about a week. Then notes in my car. Then a friend of hers started coming to my house to talk to me and say what went wrong and apologizing for her. I told her I would not get back together with her. When that didn't happen she sent 2 friends of hers to beat me up. Luckily my friends were in my apartment and they backed off. Next morning I had 2 slashed tires in my car. Almost missed a job interview. She would stalk me by staying at a cafe across the street from my place for hours, monitoring who came in and who came out and what time point. The final straw was when, after about 3 months passed, I had started dating a girl and we went to my apartment to DVD and chill. I got a call about an hour in. It was a friend of mine saying that he got a call from my ex saying that the girl with the brown hair and red blouse, exactly the description, was too ugly for me and she wanted to mess her up. I ended up making her a nice dinner and had a bottle of wine so I could make time for her to eventually leave her post at the cafe point. I ended up changing my car, apartment, cell phone, emails, and after that I haven't heard from her since. I was relatively good looking and popular in high school and was aware that girls liked me. One of those girls was someone I was studying for an app exam with. She lived a couple of blocks away and would come over when I got home from baseball practice. One night we were quizzing each other and she said something to the extent of if you get all of them right I'll let you kiss me. I did not get them all right, but she told me I could kiss her anyway. I just kind of chuckled, told her nope, I had to get them all right, and went back to studying. Later that night she sent me an email about how she views me as more than a friend and wants to know if I felt the same way. She was a cool girl and I liked hanging out with her, but I didn't want to date her, so I told her how I valued our friendship, etc. I get that it was a cliche response, but rather than accepting it gracefully, she told our app US history teacher I was harassing her. Our app US history teacher was also my baseball coach. Now, if you watch American teen movies but didn't play sports you probably think my teacher/coach told her he would speak to me about it. Then we had a good laugh in the locker room. If you played sports you're probably aware that I was benched from a game and spent the next couple of practices running laps around the perimeter of the field. I guess that's not really a horror story, per se, but it was still a shitty thing to do because a guy turned you down. When I was in high school this girl had a major crush on me and decided to write me a note one day. She found my picture in the yearbook, but due to a printing error the wrong name was next to my picture. She had someone give me the note addressed to the wrong yearbook name, and it was just going on and on about how she is in love with me and all that. I honestly thought the girl was attractive. She was weird, but kind of 90s short hair alternative cute. She was 2 grades below me, but I went up and introduced myself and we became friends. She confided in me one day that she had never kissed anyone and I said I would show her. Smooth, right? So we made out for a little while at a friend's house and things were fun. Then things kinda turned. The next day she asked me out and I said that I thought we were good friends and I don't think going out is a good idea. Let me stop here and say this was stupid teenage peer pressure bullshit. All of my friends thought she was super weird and kind of made fun of me for kissing her. If they weren't around I might have gone out with her because I liked her, but I'll let my friends get in my head. After I told her that, she burst into tears, like full on uncontrollable sobbing in the lunchroom. I felt really bad because I wasn't a guy who had ever had to turn a girl down. I wasn't some ladies man, and I had been where she was, and I felt terrible. The next few days there were cry-filled calls begging me to date her, that we were perfect together. I worked at Kmart at the time and she would call my work crying. Then she called my house when I wasn't home and talked to my mother and my brother and my stepfather. Then she started calling my friends and asking them to convince me. Then one night she showed up at Kmart wearing a big overcoat with nothing on under it. She had started getting very overly sexual in the sobbing phone calls, saying she wanted me to take her virginity and just getting super graphic. She wanted me to bang her at work in the parking lot when I got off. I declined. Then in her calls she was saying she wants to have a family with me and what our kids would look like, and it was starting to get a little bizarre. I began thinking something is not right about this. Maybe she had mental issues. Her mother eventually got in contact with my mother and asked her why I was harassing her daughter. My mother laughed and jokingly said, "My son is terrified of your daughter," and told her that she legit called 10 times a night. Apparently she had her mom convinced I was the one going after her. Then one day the calls stopped over the summer. No more random visits at work. It turns out she was having some kind of psychotic breakdown. She had made a shrine to me in her closet with pictures of me from where I have no idea and articles of my clothes she somehow got. The breaking point was she had been taken advantage of by a much older man when she told him that I didn't like her because she wasn't sexually experienced enough. I was a virgin, so he offered to teach her some things. She went away to a hospital and I didn't see her for years. Fast forward shot 3 years and I'm at a club and these group of hot chicks walk into the bar area and there she is with them. And she was fucking gorgeous. I didn't know if I should talk to her because I was the cause of her breakdown, so I just took my beer and sat across the room. She was way out of my league now, and her friends were equally beautiful. She spots me about a half hour after walking in and makes her way over to me. She is totally nice and isn't weird at all. We talk for a while and she tells me she went to live with an uncle in New York when she got out of the hospital. Her uncle worked as an assistant to some famous photographer and he discovered her and she started working as a model while living in New York City and going to school. Her friends were also models and they were her roommates and had come with her to meet her family on vacation. Turns out she ended up much better off than I did. I still talk to her on FB from time to time. She is now a mom with 2 kids and a cool little family, and she's still amazing looking. She was overly cheery, kind of a princess type, not used to being told no. We'll call her Princess. So at a college party at my buddy's apartment, she was coming on to me. I was not interested in her. I was much more interested in another girl who was discussing the merits of how taxation is a form of theft with a circle of people playing cards. We'll call her Porcupine. Well, after trying to ignore Princess for 25 minutes, Princess decided I was playing hard to get. She accidentally spills her drink on me and offers to help me dry off. I decline and ask my buddy if I can go grab a shirt from his room. I go into his room to grab a shirt and I guess she followed me because she wraps her hands around me from behind and started feeling me up. I slipped out and told her to get away from me, but she wasn't having it and blocked the door. She then said if I tried to push past her she'd tell everyone I attacked her, and who were they going to believe? This is the scenario every guy fucking dreads. Because she's right. If she claimed I attacked her there is no way in hell they'd believe me. Native, introverted, computer major guy over pretty popular social butterfly half my size girl. Thankfully Porcupine had come looking for me as it was my turn, and what the fuck was taking me so long to change a shirt? She overheard it and told Princess to get the fuck out of the room, which begrudgingly she does. But it's the only time a girl tried to coerce me like that. Plus and now we entered Tifu territory. I, believing Porcupine was looking for me for more than cards. Thank you alcohol and impaired judgment. Make a move on Porcupine. Porcupine plays for the other team. I make a complete ass out of myself in front of her. Thankfully she took it well, politely rejected me, and told me her girlfriend would be very upset with her. We went back to playing cards and my face was red as a Coke can. There was this girl, we'll call her Stacy, at work who secretly had a crush on me 2 years before I found out, and she was fired. I guess everything that I'm about to type out here happened because of 2 factors. I was able to take my lunch break early, putting her on my lunch break at the same time, and my girlfriend wanted to have lunch with me at work. I guess Stacy and I talking regularly almost every day is another factor as well. As I was walking to my car to go home, Stacy approached me from behind and asked, "Who was that woman with you at lunch?" When I explained it was my girlfriend, Stacy started making a huge deal about my GF being Asian, which was strange because Stacy is the exact same type of Asian, Vietnamese. Explaining that to her did seem to smooth anything over. Feeling confused and seeing no way to recover the conversation, I stated I had to get home and left. The next day Stacy was not there, which was nice because she made the previous day awkward and I had no clue why at that point. The next week Stacy was still not back. One of her team members, Tammy, decided to ask me why Stacy needed to take such a long break. This question threw me off guard and confused me even more, but I answered with, "Why would I know anything about that? Stacy and I only talk at work. I don't even have her number." At this point it was hard to tell who was more confused, Tammy or me. I could literally see the gears turning in Tammy's head as she was trying to formulate her next question. Eventually it comes out, "I thought you and Stacy we are going out." She tells us about all the amazing dates you go on all the time. Tammy then proceeded to tell me about some of these dates. These were all dates that I had taken my GF on and told Stacy about. My mouth and throat were completely dry. I felt like throwing up. Stacy had constructed a life with me doing things with her that I do with my actual GF, and then presented this to her team. I told Tammy that I do in fact have a GF, and that Stacy is not her. I pulled out my phone and showed Tammy pictures of my GF and I together. While my GF and Stacy share similar heights and builds, my GF is porcelain white and Stacy is dark. There are other differences, but those are the ones that would be immediately noticeable. Tammy was probably more confused than I was at that moment and seemed to slink away back to her team. Stacy showed up the following week and refused to make eye contact with me when walking into the building, which was preferable at that time anyway. About an hour later she was escorted out of the building by my boss, the head of security. Stacy was clearly pissed off. Apparently Tammy confronted Stacy about her fantasies before Stacy could even get to her desk. Stacy had a meltdown and attacked Tammy. I have no clue why Stacy was obsessed with me and the way she was. Stacy is extremely attractive and fit, and during that time I was a 275 to 310 pound blob. Stacy was making around 75k a year and I'm a security guard barely making 40k. I'm also into really nerdy stuff that I know Stacy has a dislike for, like MTG, Warhammer 40k, and Morgs. But I guess you can't try and fit crazy into a box. Anyway, this all concluded 6 months ago, and Stacy has basically dropped off the face of the earth. Kinda weird one. I had an interesting start in freshman year of college. I was pretty lonely overall, so I made it my goal to talk to 5 people each day. Just random people out and about, and boy did I suffer for this. I met a girl who was gorgeous, like way out of my league, like I'm playing t-ball, and she is in major league. Anyway, she is awesome and we start chatting, and I get a number. Then she starts seducing me, with money. It worked. It worked really well. She was like, "I'll let you use my second car 24/7, no car at the time, that's awesome. You can live with me. I can leave my shitty dorm." Fuck yay. I remember when we started talking about sex she got really weird. She wanted me to have sex like 24/7, and I was immediately thrown off like, oh okay, this is some joke clearly. Hahaha, you can stop now. I'm embarrassed enough, but she kept talking about different weird things. They were also awesome, but just how soon we met, How forthcoming. Everything was just off. In the middle of our talk about sex she sends a message saying I miss my mom and sister. What? Apparently she lost her mom and sister in a car accident like a month earlier. Rough news, right? Yeah, it is. Especially hearing that when you're an hour into a sexual conversation. She started bringing this stuff up more, like we can do each other's hair like me, and my sister used to. At this point I'd try to be nice like, oh yes, that sounds fun. I'd be happy to make you remember your sister. Then she starts saying stuff about kids. Yes. Kids. Like. Our kids. We had talked for like a week, so this was like a no-no for me, especially after she talked about all the sexual things we do, including me not having to wear a condom. I see why now. So slowly but surely I kinda just dropped the ball on how I wasn't interested. Because of recent and possibly longer past events, this girl was a little pie show. I couldn't entirely blame her, because she had gone through some shit. But I'll tell you, I didn't expect her to blackmail me with pictures of my penis. This girl sends me back a pic of my dick I sent over Snapchat. Yeah, I know. It's weird and shit, but shit dude, she fucking asked for it over and over, so eventually it just sent. But she sends it to me with the text, don't want this to fall into anyone's hands, do you? At the time I was a new freshman at a big school, where things like frats and shit were important, or at least my freshman brain thought so. At this said school they are pretty big though and whatnot, but this girl straight couldn't take rejection. She ended up mass messaging me daily with little threats, and then little things to seduce me. It would go from I'll send a pic of your face and a pic of your dick to your family, and to your teachers, to if you stay with me, I'll take you on a vacation to Milan for spring. TLDR, girl seemed nice. Turned out crazy from past traumatic events. Tried to seduce me with money. Almost worked. Got creepy. Tried to blackmail me with pics of my penis. I'll do my best to remember the details of this relationship I had from age of 18 to 22, but I'm 30 now, and memories can get fuzzy. Here goes. I met a beautiful girl who had migrated here with her family from the Philippines about a year or two before we met. I instantly liked her. She was super nice, attractive, and we had a lot in common. But honestly the reason I thought these things is I didn't know any better. After a year of dating her with very minor arguments or disputes, we moved in together, and that's when the serious trouble started. We would fight over the dumbest things and she would just take it to a level that wasn't even close to appropriate. They became more and more common and my resentment toward her grew and grew. She would even get physical, spew hateful things at me, make me feel like shit, then in the end, would reel me in with tears and apologies and we'd continue on with our life together. It got more frequent, however, and the severity increased. We broke up a few times, but she would basically stalk me until she could convince me to get back together with her. I think I was just used to it, and I did believe I had to help take care of her. She had threatened suicide multiple times, physically attacked me with weapons including knives. Cops called on her. She's been to the mental hospital for her threats of suicide. She lied to me about being pregnant. She lied about being on the pill and actually got pregnant, but lost the baby at 5 months. Neglected to tell me that she had a child in the Philippines. The stalking when we'd break up was terrible because she tried multiple tactics to get to me. Visiting where I lived, sending her friends over to tell me I need to talk to her for closure, saying she was pregnant, going to my work, and flirting with coworkers and customers trying to get my attention. Oh man, there was more, but I'm getting tired of thinking of all the crap she pulled. In the end I realized that I didn't have the ability to stay broken up from her for forever if she was so persistent. I still feel terrible about what I did next, but at the time I was just so tired of everything. I had been denying going out with a cute girl from work who made it clear she was into me. One night I just said, sure, let's go out. We ended up sleeping together. I didn't go home to her, didn't answer her texts asking where I was, and didn't answer her calls. I broke up with her the next day and my ex eventually found out who she was and called her and harassed her constantly saying terrible things. Then after talking to her one last time she left me alone for good. My misdeed had created a rift she couldn't get over and left me alone, and I have hardly heard from her since. While I don't recommend going through this for anyone, I do hope someone reading this can learn from my mistakes. Recognize the signs early and stand up for yourself instead of losing your worth and getting beaten down. Even if you feel like it's you two against the world, realize that you are worth better and that there are tons of fish in the sea. And if you're reading this and thinking this can only happen to someone who has low self-esteem already, you're wrong. It sneaks up if you're not careful. I was varsity baseball, golf, had lots of friends, and did well in school, great family support. Just be sure to leave that person who isn't good for you behind you, and don't look back. Maybe get a Bumble account and see what's out there. IDK, but good luck everyone, and I hope you find your special someone who treats you right. Okay. So about 6 years ago I was in a relationship with this girl, and at the time things weren't working out between us. In all fairness, I did cheat on her. She found out because I broke down and confessed to her. So as one could imagine, she didn't trust me at all, but I still wanted to make things better, so I did my best to regain that trust. After 3 years of dating I couldn't take it anymore. Now I know I messed up when I cheated, but man, instead of making progress things would just get worse. I would go to her house, and I kid you not, 5 minutes after leaving she would call me to make sure I wasn't going somewhere else. She wanted to sleep with the webcam on so she could see me, and the list goes on and on. After a couple of months after that I just couldn't take it anymore, so I told her that I needed some space and to think things over. Naturally she got pissed and started calling me and texting me non-stop on a daily basis, 40 missed calls and texts somewhere threatening others, asking for forgiveness. After 2 days of crazy texts I went home for the weekend, and since she lived 10 minutes away from my parents' house I knew she would come to my parents and try to corner me into getting back together. I told my mom what would happen and begged her, please don't let her in tomorrow, I know she's going to try to come in. Next morning at 6, guess who came by the X, and she literally just walked inside my house. I was still sleeping, thank God, and my dad had to block her way into coming into my room, but she still insisted that she has to come in and speak to me. This is where things got crazy. She told my parents she was pregnant. Lucky for me my mom is smart and decided to call her bluff and took her to the lab for 2 pregnancy tests, which thankfully came a negative point. But things didn't stop there. She would still text me each day begging for forgiveness. I did reply once just to let her know that it was okay and that we should just leave things how they are. But the messages kept coming up for months. She would drive close to where I lived, and I would run into her at random places I knew she didn't like. It really took a toll on me, and I was skeptical of having another relationship for a while, just because the whole ordeal was such a crazy ride. Luckily I did found someone who doesn't have these tendencies, and we actually call my ex the crazy one whenever her name pops up. She turned out to be okay after all this time, and is in a relationship with a girl, so I'm happy for her even after all the crazy shit we went through. Sorry for the long post. I play both sides of the field, and I've posted about my craziest situation with the girl side before, but I'll share again. Point. So I was friends with her for a while, and then we decided to give dating a try. Was supposed to be a really chill then more serious type of thing, basically going in with no expectations. I really liked her, and she was totally normal at the beginning. Actually started to connect with her on a deeper level that I'm not used to. I don't connect with others very well, and seldom have serious relationships of any kind. About 2 months in, she goes crazy. Starts trying to pressure me into going to the courthouse and getting married. Wants to move in with me. Quit her job, but refused to apply for disability, wanting me to take care of her and her teenager. I would be at work and she'd get pissed if I didn't text back immediately, even though she knew the workplace didn't allow phones to be out on your desks. She worked at the same place. She then demanded to spend every minute at my apartment, demand I leave work early, to the point she'd call my coworkers and threaten to kill herself. When I stopped playing into that nonsense, she would come to work and see if my car was there and leave flowers on Odes and the wiper. Hanging out with friends or wanting time to myself started becoming a huge sin to her. I wanted out by this point, and just after 3 months, I broke it off. She had gotten so crazy, I needed to have a friend with me to make sure nothing happened. I went about my business, and for about 4 hours, I didn't hear from her. Thought, wow, maybe she's taking it better than I thought. Nope. Suddenly, got a flurry of texts. Probably close to 50 or so in the first hour. She made threatening comments like it's on, and you're in for it. I ended up having to block her number, so she moved to Facebook. She refused to give my key back and made all sorts of nonsense comments about how I ruined her life and was her true love. Remember, this was 3-month relationship and she had been with a guy for 8 years before I came along. Eventually, I blocked her on Facebook point, so then she starts trying to friend all my relatives on FB and posting statuses about me. A few friends of mine did accept friend requests from her previously, so they started messaging me, asking if I was okay and safe. I didn't want to know the actual threats she was making, but I do know she was saying she'd reveal all my secrets, even though she didn't know anything no one else knew. I like that it backfired, because she did reveal my biggest secret and no one cared. Lol, I had to change my locks, of course, and she was legally banned from coming onto the apartment property. She found my Livestream account and came onto a Livestream threatening to kill herself, but thankfully, mod powers allow me to permaban her. I threatened to call the police and she left me alone after that. A while later, I saw a dude who looked suspiciously like the dude she spent 8 years with fiddling with the cable box on the apartment building, and my internet went out. Cable company said someone had cut the line for my apartment. A year later, people are fucking with my door late at night and the cover on the deadbolt, where you lift it up and can use a skeleton key, was always being lifted. I got an email from her later on because her kid jumped ship and went to Job Corps and she wanted me to feel bad for her. I ignored it. Of course, I moved twice since then. I was especially wary of the door fiddling at night. Don't know if it was her, but it could have been, and wouldn't be surprised. Haven't heard anything regarding her since, nor from her. I just hope I never run into her anywhere. Not that crazy, but whatever, I'll share anyway. I was friends in high school with this very quiet and awkward nerdy girl. I was one of her only 2 friends. We bonded over our weird interests, obscure TV shows, fanfiction, etc. We became friends when I asked her what she was writing in a notebook. It was gay fanfiction lol, and quickly became best friends. I should also mention that I'm gay. I assume she knew this immediately, but I also made it abundantly clear at least a few months into us being friends. After high school, I drifted away from 99.9% of my HS friends, but not her. She and I still texted regularly and hung out. Often we would talk about really personal stuff. We were both into BDSM, to mention one topic. Deep down, we were very similar people despite appearing to be opposites to everyone else. I'm an outgoing gay guy who works out a lot. She's the exact opposite of that. We are both submissives though, and related on that level a lot. I thought of her like my sister, and I thought she saw me as a brother. I ended up getting a serious long-term boyfriend. At first, our friendship was a lot closer after this, and we hung out a lot more. And then one day, a few months into the 1-year mark of my relationship, she disappears off the face of the fucking earth. Then about 6 months later, she shows up acting very weird and like an asshole towards me. I get a text in the middle of the night that she needs to tell me something. She's met someone at her Walmart job who is exactly like me, looks like me, laughs like me, talks like me. She confesses that early on in our friendship, she had a very huge and painful crush on me. She waxes poetic. This blindsides me. She says she is feeling these same things for this new doppelganger of mine. I had no idea what to say. It didn't even matter in the end, because she ghosted me almost immediately after that. I guess she left me for great value. Crabby. I wish I could say I moved on from that weird moment, but I really didn't. She had been one of my closest friends for a long time and I related to her on a level I did with very few other people. It's been about a year since then, and I still feel deeply confused and violated. Started talking to a girl on a dating site one Sunday just over a year back. She seemed perfect, stunning, intelligent, chatty and interesting. We met a few days later on Wednesday night, in her hometown, the next town over, maybe a half-hour train ride or so. Wow. Blown away. She was incredible in person, and she was really into me too. We talk about when we are next free to hang out. Turns out we are both free Thursday, the night after. We've had so much fun we decide we may as well. We then proceed to hang out Friday night too, and she stays over at my place. It feels so comfortable and natural, and I can't believe my luck. Saturday, she dashes off to work in the morning. After she's left, I get a series of text messages questioning me about one of my best friends, another girl, who I've known for around 15 years. Purely platonic. I'm estranged from my family, and have been well over a decade. My friend is like a surrogate sister to me. I explain this to my date, and after arguing against her paranoia, she seems to accept it. The following day, she calls me. She's distraught and upset, and it's her job getting her down. She feels she isn't being respected, and is being taken advantage of. She's already mentioned some of this to me, and she's already told me about her plans to look elsewhere. I remind her of this, and explain that despite us only meeting recently, I'll do what I can to help with that. She angrily tells me she doesn't want my help or advice and hangs up. I try calling back, no answer. She eventually messages me later apologizing for the outburst, and tells me she was also upset as she doesn't know what my intentions are due to having a close friendship with a different girl. I tell her she needs to let go of this, and assure her that I'm very much into her. We decide to hang out Monday night. She comes over to mine again, and we order takeaway. Whilst waiting for the delivery, she casually drops in a bunch of racist slurs about the delivery guy. I was a little blindsided, and tell her I'm not really cool with that. She gets upset. She reasons that all her family say these things so it's okay, right? I tell her it isn't. We enjoy a lovely frosty evening together, and she eventually expresses to me that she doesn't appreciate being treated like a child and told what she can't say. We decide to sleep separate that night and see where we go in the morning. Whilst in work Tuesday, I receive a torrent of messages telling me how upset she is about things, and that she's sorry for what she said, and that she's definitely not racist, and that she really wants to see me again. I ask her when she's free, and she's still in town and free tonight, Tuesday night. She comes over again. She explains she has an important appraisal meeting in work the following day, and she has to be in bed early and up early. I'll let her know that I'm actually doing a late shift in work, so won't be getting up until at least a couple hours after she has. She's fine with that. We have a nice evening together, and things seem right again, although having disagreements like this less than a week after meeting her is ringing alarm bells. We wake up early Wednesday morning. She gets out of bed to get ready and go, and I let her know I'm staying in bed as I don't have to be up for a few hours yet. She eventually leaves. I go back to sleep. When I wake again, I message her to find out how the meeting went in work. She tells me it went awful. She's been crying in the bathroom all morning, and not to bother messaging her anymore, because I clearly don't care, as I didn't see her out of the door like a real man this morning, and B, didn't message her sooner to find out what was going on. I'm stunned. This is the 4th time in a week since meeting that we've argued. She berates me for not giving a shit about her, and I bring up how on Sunday, when she called me, she berated me exactly for giving a shit, so I don't really know what to do. We argue by text all day whilst in work, and this proceeds into the night. She brings up my friend again, and her paranoia is on overdrive. She tries to tell me that she's a good-natured person and I've brought out the worst in her, and she hates acting like she is. She tells me she was considering moving to my town to make things easier for us. She tells me that she's never met anyone like me before, and that she truly believes in a romantic fairytale future. She tells me I'm not innocent, and that I've caused her trouble, inconvenience, and pain. All kinds of babbling contradictions and accusations. I've known her approximately 10 days, 7 in person. I tell her maybe we should just cool off a little, step back, reassess, and give each other a couple of days. She responds by telling me I'm cruel, nasty, and that it's no wonder I'm estranged from my family, because why would anyone want to know me? Now, I'm largely over the family stuff. It's been difficult at times, but I've a support network of some really excellent friends. I have, however, never had someone take that piece of information that I'd shared with her in good faith and use it against me to try and put me down. Oh man, it hurt. I told her right at that moment we are done. She wasn't though. I must have received around 80 to 90 messages for the remainder of Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday, telling me she was sorry, that we are both victims, and that we are both responsible for falling out, telling me to give her another chance. instructing me to respond as it's my last chance at happiness with her. Telling me that I owe it to her. I eventually caved and asked her to please leave me alone. Around 80 or 90 more messages. I again ask her to leave me alone and then block her peace. A couple of weeks later, back on the dating site. Let's try again. It takes all of about 10 minutes of me being online for me to receive messages from her. She's there, she's spotted me, and homed in like a heat-seeking missile. She's extremely sorry, she's been dealing with hardship and stress and wrongfully taken it out on me. She's looked at what she said and how she's acted, and understands how awful she was. She still insists that I should shoulder some of the blame. No reason given as to why though. She's asking for another chance. I ask her to please let me have some time to think on it, and I'll get back to her. She isn't happy with this, because it's a simple yes or no, and I shouldn't mess her about. I express again, please leave me alone for now, and I'll get back to you. Stop with the pressure and the angst. She doesn't relent. She's desperate for her answer now. Again she feels she's owed it. So I tell her no. Boy does she fucking blow up. A tirade of messages through the dating app. And so, blocked on their 2-pointer letter comes, around a month later. Before I've even opened it, I see the address on the envelope has been handwritten by someone unprofessional. I see the postmark is from her hometown, and the weight and thickness tells me there's a novel in there. I get a sinking feeling. I open it to find a 5-6 page A4 letter telling me once again to give her a chance. It's all very woe is me, and she does that peculiar thing again where she flatters me, but also insists I'm to blame. The end of the letter has her number, and to contact her if I've changed my mind. She also says that if I don't respond, then she'll accept it and move on. I don't respond. It's done. As far as I'm concerned. A couple of months later still, a text out of the blue from a number 1 don't have saved. Hey, it's name. Just thought you'd like to know, I got a new job and I moved to your town now. I live on the street just next to yours, by coincidence. Let me know if you want to hang out. I kept all my windows and doors locked and curtains drawn for about 3 months after that. I haven't heard anything since though, thankfully. I think it's over, haha. TL. Dr. Girl accuses me of sexually assaulting her to the dating service I met her on. I get banned and have to prove my innocence. Oh boy, do I ever have a doozy. Met a girl on Bumble at the end of February. Met up for brunch a week or so after. Nothing special. Not bad, but I didn't see a reason to pursue further as I didn't feel a connection. I thanked her for a nice brunch and wished her the best in her dating adventures. She didn't reply. Okay, whatever. About a week later she texts me and says, hey, I'm in your area, do you want to get coffee? I agreed as I was having a relatively quiet night and kind of wanted to get out of the house. She literally caught me at the perfect time, and I figured maybe I'd give her a second chance. Maybe I missed something. Coffee happens and nothing changed, but she did seem nice. A friendly hug goodbye. Another week passes and it's a Thursday. It's about 9 PM and she texts, I'm in your area, want to get a beer? I had a flight to the USA, I'm in Toronto, Canada, the next day at 1 PM, so I didn't need to get up and kind of felt like a beer. I agree. We have a great time, but there's still no connection for me. We are laughing about funny videos and whatnot, and one thing leads to another, and she ends up at my place to watch a few. Totally platonic in my mind. I wasn't even thinking. So, about 30 minutes into being on my couch she says, you haven't even kissed me yet. What the fuck? I reply with, does that mean I need to get up? Thinking this would be a bit of sarcasm, to explain I'm not down with it. She calls my bluff, says okay, fine and moves in close. She kisses me, and by kiss, I mean, she gives me a solid open mouth kiss and immediately bites down on my bottom lip. Not a cute sexy bite, but like she's trying to chew an overdone steak. I pull her jaw off my lip, literally, and tell her very clearly to never do that again. She goes in for another kiss and this time bites again, but with such force, I swore she drew blood. I checked. She left a serious mark, but no blood thankfully. I asked her to leave immediately and thankfully she did. Over the weekend, while I'm in the USA she texts me saying she wants to have a threesome with me and her friend, and she also wants to take me to Oasis, which is a local and well-known sex club. I don't reply. She continues to text on the Monday, when I get back. I don't reply. Tuesday, I finally reply and tell her that I'm not interested and I think we shouldn't talk. She asks why. I explain that I don't see a future, and more so than anything, she couldn't respect my lines of consent. She says whatever, you'll get used to it. I don't reply. About an hour later she texts me to tell me that she feels abused by me and that I'm a terrible person. I simply reply with I'm sorry you feel that way, but I've done nothing to negate that. If it's how you really feel, then you'll agree that we shouldn't see one another again. She goes on with a small essay about how much of a piece of shit I am. I reply take care and leave it at that point. The next day I go to open Bumble and I can't log in. I contact their support and they tell me I'm banned, but won't tell me why outside of we've received reports of inappropriate behavior by you, and we strive to protect our users. I ask them if it's because of, or made by this one woman. They say they keep reports anonymous for safety. I agree with this. I tell them the story of this woman and then screenshot all the messages from the Thursday onwards where she admits to crossing my consent lines, asking for a threesome, sex club, etc. Then me rejecting her, then her blowing up and saying I'm abusive. Bumble support says thank you, we will review. An hour later they reply thank you. Your account has been reinstated, and we apologize for any inconvenience. An hour after that I get a text from her go, fuck yourself you piece of shit from the girl. Guys, hell, anyone. Lesson of the day, always protect yourself. When it comes to behind closed doors, it's your word against someone else's. Always act ethically, treat others the way you would want, or would want your child, to be treated, and never believe someone who has not earned your trust. In all fairness, the moment she began to ask for the threesome and shit, I knew something was up, and more or less set a trap for her to admit she assaulted me in my home, and I had to ask her to leave. She fell for it, and it was my saving grace. Really hit it off with this girl from POF. Spent a week sending messages on the site. She was funny, charming, had ambition, more than me anyway. About 10 minutes into the official date after we ordered, she mentioned the gay parade was coming in the following few days, said that it was the reason the streets were all decorated and crowded, and asked me what I thought of it. I don't have a horse in that race. I'm not gay myself, but I have a few very good friends who are, and I support the parade and everything it stands for. She went on this monologue about how the gays are ruining the country, how it was a mental illness, etc. None of what she had to say was nice at all. With the inflection in her tone, I knew that there was no way around this. So much hate for a bunch of guys and girls that she hasn't met. It was mind-boggling, but one thing for sure, anyone with those kind of feelings toward complete strangers is a shitbag of a human being. I did the most sensible thing, said I'm sorry I'll have to say goodbye, got up and left. There wasn't much I could do, except leave the Tim Hortons I invited her to. BTW Tim is a great place for a first date. My sexual orientation was questioned vigorously via text messages a few minutes after I left, while I was walking on my way back home. I'd rather be gay with class than straight trash. I didn't get laid that night, and for the rest of that year carried LOL, because I stood up for my friends who weren't even here. Worth it. In college, a girl my roommate and I worked with overheard us talking about when he was leaving that night for fall break, and when he'd be back. The next time she and I were alone, she randomly asked if I wanted to hang out the next day. She was kinda cute, a little odd, and I had no plans, so I said sure. We had flirted a little, but never really talked too much, so I thought she just wanted to day drink. Maybe wrestle naked, who knows. It was college. My neighbor was hanging out with me when she showed up, and we decided to watch Super Troopers. She asked where my roommate was, and I told her he was home for the weekend for break. We made it through the opening scene, when she sat down her half-empty beer and left. Just left, didn't say anything, just walked out the door. This is before cell phones were a crucial aspect of dating, and Netflix and chill required mailing DVDs, so I couldn't text her to ask what was up. Next day at work I saw her, and said literally this, "Hey," before she walked towards the manager, and said she was taking her break. 10 minutes later there are sirens and a stretcher rolling through the back door. Apparently she was a cutter and decided it was okay I write my roommate's name on the break room wall with her wrist juice. Broke up with my ex after she became violent, manipulative, emotionally and physically abusive, selling her nudes and sexting other guys, married ones at that, stole from me and my family, and began getting heavily into hard drugs. I kicked her out, dumped her and all her possessions with her biological family, and wished her the best. I changed my number and made it explicitly clear that, even though I had no hard feelings for her, I had no interest in getting back with her ever. I changed my number and my locks in case she had snuck a key away. Things were quiet for a bit until I started talking to a new girl. Girl ghosts me out of the blue. I find out from a friend that my ex had messaged her telling her I was abusive, a rapist and a hard drug user. I was pissed, but made a new FB and made sure to preemptively block my ex and all her friends. You would think this was the end, but no, this evil has no end point. Almost every girl I have spoken to since has received threatening messages or falsified information about me. She found out I had to move back home and about my subsequent injury. She drives past my house and messages pictures of it to my sisters. She somehow got my number and messages me from blocked numbers every so often. I've changed my number twice since then, but she pops up like a cold sore every few months. It's been 2.5 years, but she shows no sign of stopping. TL/DR. X goes nuts, X gets dumped, X goes extra nuts for over 2 years. I've had it all. Every stereotypical reaction. Worst. Claimed she was pregnant to keep me with her. I said, prove it and I will reconsider. She got her pregnant friend to pee on a stick and brought it back to me. I put 2 plus 2 together and called her a liar. I suspected her friend's involvement as they were both in the same room when she and her friend suddenly have to go to the bathroom together. The next week, I see her coming at me in the car park of our college, and she has blood all over her jeans and hands, and she is hysterically crying. What the foo? Claimed she had a miscarriage and it was all my fault. I took a quick look at the back of her leg. She had slashed it and smeared the blood all over her front and hands, and she passed out in front of me. Ambulance ride and operation to repair the artery later, and almost 3 weeks of recovery. She appears at my doorstep with her friend and her mother, who start accusing me of abuse and assault. Sure enough, she is sporting a shiner on one eye and a cut above the other. Police get involved. Nothing can be proved. They take statements and alibis, and it's clear I could not have been anywhere near her when she claims I had abused her. She gets an official warning from the police, and I think that will finally be the end of it. Nope. A week later, she is tailing me in her car around town. I stop, get out and go over to her car. She is ignoring me. I drive on. She follows me. I stop at the shops to get stuff. She is waiting in the car park, filming me on her mobile phone. I don't even go over. It would have just added fuel to the fire. I drive off nice and calm. Then I had an idea. I drove to the police station and parked up, went inside and told the receptionist that someone was following me and they were driving X make of car with registration plate Z example etc. I left the police station and she disappeared. Never saw her again. Total psychopath. Most grim. Broke up with a girl who was desperate to move in with me at my parents' house, which would not have worked out. She tried everything, bribing me, withholding sex, interrupting my sleep until I had enough, and said you're not moving in with me until you tell me why, because you clearly don't love me. She confessed her father was running a brothel out of their house and she wanted out. I didn't take pity, but told her to go to the police because her father was a pose and should be locked up for doing that to his daughter. Most crazy was with a girl who was older than me, some 4 years older. She was a full-time nurse who was, to be fair, smoking hot. However, she had a full-on nervous meltdown in front of me, my friends, her friends, our parents and her parents. I never did found out what caused it, but she went catatonic. Collapsed in the restaurant after spending 15 minutes hysterical crying, with her family and friends desperately trying to calm her down. Ambulance crew came. They said she had a seizure and she went off to R&D. Her parents called 3 days later to say the relationship was off and she was still in hospital recovering, and they haven't figured out what caused it, so I was not to see her because they couldn't fully trust me. I know it wasn't me, so maybe she was hiding something. Sorry for the essay. TL. Doctor, I have poor choice in ladies. But now I'm happily married with the same person. Copy pasted from another thread. Some lass messaged me on Facebook, and she was kinda hot, so I went along with it. This was a Thursday. I mentioned I was going to a party on Friday, and she was literally begging me to bring her as my +1. I funnily enough said no. I'd planned to take my buddy for weeks. Friday rolls round, and while I'm at the party she keeps messaging me, and eventually comes out and says she's trying to not fall completely in love with you/soz I'm drunk. I took this as weird as she backed it up saying we were made to be together and everything. Thought it was just a joke/flirt at first, but then she kicked off major when I didn't reciprocate. She blocks me, and I go on with my life. Fast forward a few days, in work doing a set of new breaks or something, Lindsay, office lady, asks me to come into the office as there's 2 policemen waiting for me. I walk in and sure enough, 2 coppers stood there. My boss is glaring at me. Lindsay won't make eye contact, and the customer in the office looked like he really didn't want to be there. Long story short, she phoned the police saying I raped her, and she was pregnant with my child. After I told them I've never met her and first spoke to her days ago, they basically shrugged it off like yeah, this isn't the first time this has happened, we believe you, and off they went. TL. Doctor, girl I've never met accused me of rape because I wasn't in love with her. Mine's not nearly as good as some others, but I figured I'd post up anyways. I met up for coffee with someone a couple years younger than me, but 1 year behind me in school. A few months before her grad, she was devastated because she wasn't asked by anyone to grad, and then turned down by a lot of her classmates. She came to me in tears asking if I'd be her grad date. I had a hard time finding someone to come with me to my grad, so I understood her woes. Trying to be a friend, I agreed to go with her. That's when things started to get a little rough. Her demeanor changed almost entirely. Overnight, she progressed to a stage V clinger, and a few days later was telling me laughing that if I ever left her, she probably wouldn't make it another night because I was so kind to her. It was odd to say the least. She started texting me every night through the entire evening and was texting me well into the morning. She thought it was cute when I stopped texting and made note of that to me. I thought it was starting to get creepy and started to pull back a lot more on the texting with her. She didn't really relent. I decided I'd rough it through for a few more weeks so that I didn't break things off and embarrass her for her grad. I really just didn't want her to go through all that. After her grad, which was surprisingly uneventful, I texted her to let her know I didn't think it was going to work for us to keep seeing each other. Silence. After a few hours, I got a text from her saying that she'd bought a one-way bus ticket to somewhere remote and was bringing a knife, and that this was goodbye forever. I panicked and called her mom at home, letting her know what had happened and trying to see if her daughter would listen to her reason. She told me she was in her room right now. I asked her to double check. She checked nonchalantly, and her daughter was still there, acting like nothing was wrong. Looking back now, I wonder if even that was a test to see how much I cared. When I realized she was trying to guilt me and take advantage of me, I cut off communication with her. Hell, I even ended up with a new cell phone a few weeks later, not because of her, but because I started paying for my own cell phone. A year later, new phone number in hand, I get a single text from a number one didn't recognize. Hey, sorry, I don't seem to have your number in my phone. Who is this? You know who, silly. I found out that Facebook had taken my cell number and was broadcasting it to the world, and she looked up my account a year later. I texted back, look, I'm really sorry, but when I ended things it wasn't a temporary end. I'd really appreciate if you didn't contact me, because this is frankly really weird and disturbing. She answered, Jesus, all you guys think about is sex. I hope you die alone and single. Just to be completely clear, we had never gotten physical in any way and sex had never crossed my mind with her. I'm glad in the end, because that kind of person would have made my life miserable. I'm so glad that I nipped that bud when I did, but I learned a few things about not having your cell phone attached to social media and being a hawk with your privacy settings. I've also really tried to dial back being overly polite like mama taught me. Not only does it come across as neckbeardy and creepy, but I've now experienced people reading way more into my demeanor than I intended. It also helped me realize how tough girls have it when guys won't relent, like with girls just being polite, or guys making moves at the club. Fortunately, I'm a 6'5" guy and it's a little tough to physically intimidate me, but it made me realize how rough it would be for someone without my size advantage. We were dating for about a month. I needed a new pillow for my bed, so we went to the mall. I used a $10 JCPenney coupon to get the pillow for like 9 cents and let her pick it out because she was likely going to be the one sleeping on it a couple weeks later. I couldn't deal with her crazy emotional breakdowns over every little thing. My car made a funny noise, better fall apart in the parking lot in the middle of a date, and over the top clinginess. So I called her and broke up with her as amicably as I could. She was super upset, but that's how breakups go, right? And I offer to mail back any stuff she left at my place, so she doesn't have to make some awkward walk of shame style pickup point. So I mail back a little box of random stuff she left around. Like a week later I get a litany of super aggressive texts about how I didn't send back her pillow or her candle, which was a half-burned cheap oak candle she brought over one day, cost maybe $5 and would have cost more to ship than buy a new one. So I'm an awful person who was just using her, blah 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 point. According to Facebook she was with another guy a week later and announcing her super happy pregnancy a month after that. Totally dodged a bullet, as she absolutely seemed like the secretly poke holes in condoms type. Being around her was legitimately making me uncomfortable by the end of it. Ho ho ho, I got one. This was back in high school, but my friends and I were playing soccer in the park, as we usually do. One day, this trio walks in, a boy and 2 girls. The boy comes to me and says that one of the girls wants to talk to me. I go on over, and they basically ask me for my email address. Never understood why they didn't ask for a phone number. Me being the dumbass I was, I gave it, and walked away. What followed were the 6 most stressful moments of my life. This girl professed undying love, which I respectfully declined at first, but she refused to stop. It eventually came down to me blocking her, and her creating new accounts to bother me with. What really dialed it to 11, however, was the bodily harm she was causing. This girl carved my name into her arm, and sent a picture of it. That shit, to a high schooler, is scary as hell. I didn't want to approach my parents about it, because I didn't trust them to take my side, and instead just blame me for being on the computer too much. That wasn't even all of it, as one day, her friend hits me up, pleading I talk to her, cause allegedly she'd walked down the road the previous night, dazed, and almost got hit by a truck. The final straw came, when I somehow received a text from her, having never given her my number before. I literally lost it that night, and a sort of mist fell over my eyes. When it lifted, my phone was unusable. I still don't know what I did, but I stopped using AIM and email for quite a bit. Eventually, through sheer force, I was able to stop talking to her. Interestingly enough, we started talking again a couple of years later, and she seemed a lot more sane, kinda anyway. Still some weird as fuck shit there, but I hesitantly answer her questions regarding the college she was going to, my college. A girl who I had been friends with got really upset when I cut her off because she was rude to my girlfriend at the time. They went to the same school and my girlfriend/teacher, who's a family friend, would tell me what she would do to her. Anyway, I cut her off, and I think all is good. Flash forward 5 months, I've just got out the shower when I hear the door ring. My mum answers it, and I hear, "Hey, milliseconds isn't today." I realized it was her, and quickly got dried, and went to meet my maker. She acted all pleasant around my family, but I would be home alone with her soon, because they were going out. So quickly thinking, I said this was the time I usually take my dog for a walk and she can come point. So we go for a walk, and talk about life. She's keeping it together, which was impressive, and after a 2-hour walk I tell her to sit and talk. She starts bawling her eyes out and yelling at me. Keep in mind, the park I had chosen was near a primary school and kids were leaving. It was late afternoon. I told her to calm down, but she snapped at me and told me they can fuck off and I need to listen. She said that after our 2-year friendship, she'd had feelings for me and can't believe I chose my ex over her. I was confused because we went to formal together as friends and she apparently hit on one of my friends, which is cool because I didn't like her. I de-escalated the situation by handing her my dog to cuddle. Risky move thinking about it because she cold hurt her, but it did make her happy. My poor dog has been through a lot, haha. I love that dog. Anyway, after she calmed down I told her that our friendship is over and we should go our separate ways. She was okay with that, and I walked her to a tram stop to say goodbye. I saw her recently near my work, actually just the other month. She's put on some weight and gave me a death stare the whole train ride, came onto my carriage. I wish her the best. I met a young single mother on AMM, looking for a FWB. Perfect, just what I go looking for. After meeting her, recognizing that neither of us are looking for a relationship and deciding that neither of us were murders, we do the sex. We do the sex a lot over a couple of months. She's doing other guys, I'm fucking other women, and usually fuck each other once a week. After a weird conversation with her about how she just had to tell me something important and how it had to be in person, I realize she's caught feelings and I pump the brakes. Tell her I'm not looking for a relationship, this has run its course, blah blah. She's upset, but acts normal. 2 days later, I get a message on the site I met her on. It's some single woman a few suburbs away, wanting to chat. We start chatting. Long and the short of it is it was a friend of hers catfishing me. Once I agreed to meet the woman, my phone blows up with a torrent of angry texts and phone calls from the former FWB, accusing me of betraying her trust and cheating on her. Doesn't matter that she had been spit roasted by 2 strangers in the past week. Me flirting with her friend was a betrayal of her trust. Several days of abuse from her. Threats from angry brothers, strange cars constantly near the house ensue, eventually letting up after I threatened to send the videos she made of her on the spit. All was quiet for 2 weeks until she blew up my phone, and when she couldn't get me, Facebook stalked my family to get in touch with them about her surprise pregnancy. Public messages all over my wall, my mother's wall, my brother's walls. Nobody in my family knew she even existed. She was just a fuck. But that didn't stop her from announcing to the world that I had impregnated her. I, who had fucked her once in the last month with a condom, had apparently knocked her up, and she somehow knew this a full 4 days before her period was due to begin. She was already the mother of one, so she was no stranger to this. In response to this, I posted a public message to her wall, calling her out on her bullshit. Talked about how we met, adult matchmaker, the extent of our relationship, we fucked each other half to death, then time I bought her the morning after pill when the condom broke, her friend catfishing me, her brothers threatening me, everything. I ended the post with an image attachment, a screen cap of the video she sent me. Blurred the naughty bits out, but thanks to the lower back tattoo, there could be no doubt that it was her, on her knees with a cock in her mouth and pussy. I said that if she was pregnant, there was a 1/3 chance that it was me, and tagged the 2 guys she fucked in the post for the whole world to see. I got a suspension from Facebook for it, but I never heard from her again. I was a bartender for a few years, so I saw a lot of bad reactions to rejection, but here is the worst that I saw from a girl. This girl and her 2 friends, girl 1, 2, and 3, show up at my bar, and girls 2 and 3 start telling girl 1 about how she should text this guy she likes and get him up there so that girl 1 can ask him out. I saw this a lot and I never understood why ladies like to be in groups to ask someone out. They have maybe 2 drinks and girl 1 is feeling brave, so she texts this guy. The guy shows up, and it is very clear from the start that he has no romantic interest in girl 1, but he is definitely into girl 2. For reference, girl 1 is pretty, but girl 2 is definitely the best looking of the 3. They have a couple more drinks and the guy is mostly focusing on girl 2, but girl 1 is trying her best. Eventually girl 2 and girl 3 go to the bathroom, and girl 1 takes her shot. The guy declines, but does so in a polite and respectful manner. Girl 1 does not take this well though, and starts bawling her eyes out, and runs into the bathroom. Girl 2 and girl 3 storm out of the bathroom seconds later, and start screaming at this dude, calling him all kinds of names, demanding to know why he rejected girl 1. The guy's pretty shocked and looks at me, and I said, "Don't worry about your tab. I think you should probably go," so he leaves. Girl 1 eventually comes out of the bathroom and she starts yelling at girl 2 about how it was her fault and how it isn't fair that every guy likes her, and ends up slapping girl 2. So then girls 1 and 2 start yelling and hitting each other until I can get out from behind the bar, and girl 3 pulls girl 2 away and I pull girl 1 away. They all left separately after that, and they were all terrible tippers, so it ended up costing me money to have a big scene and fight in my bar. Not recommended. Never had a particularly crazy ex-girlfriend. My current wife, who I'm trying to divorce, is pretty nuts though. So one night I catch her on dating sites sexting other guys. To me that's cheating, and after a few months I realize I can't trust her anymore and tell her I'm moving out. I moved out around 3 months later. So far not so crazy, right? Well, after I told her I was moving out, she tried to kill herself. I literally had to hide all the sharp objects in the house. The first night at my new apartment she called me telling me she desperately needed to talk to me about our son, so over she came. She then basically just refused to leave and screamed at me while stuck in the hallway because I wouldn't let her in any of the rooms. The screaming woke up my son, and when I went to pick him up she started attacking me from behind while I was holding a child. So for me, that was the final straw. I just wanted a divorce, to be done with it, sort out a reasonable custody agreement and move on. I then went to see a lawyer, who informed me that for an immediate divorce certain conditions need to be met. But here's the problem, I don't have any actual proof of anything, and he's completely correct. All she has to do is deny it or say no to the divorce, and I'm still married. So here I'm 18 months later, still married, still being refused a divorce because she doesn't want one. She's too busy working to meet anyone, so what use is a divorce to her anyway? This is why, no matter how much I love someone in the future, and I have an awesome and amazing current, so I will almost certainly never get married again. We went on one date. I wasn't feeling it. She was very into herself, and that was it. We had met at a weekly bar trivia. The next week, she was there, and everything was amicable. Trivia ended and I left. But I went with my friends to another bar to just hang out for another hour or so. I arrive home and notice a car parked on the street at my next door neighbors. No big deal. My neighbors across the street have like 4 adult children living in their house and grandkids. So often some of the adult children will sit in their car listening to music or taking phone calls just to get privacy. So I don't think anything of it. I go in the house, and about 30 seconds later, there's a knock at my door. It's her. She's belligerent and crying, and extremely drunk. I shut the door in her face when she starts yelling at my "Who are you just on a date with?" A side piece. She starts banging on the door again. I open it with a plastic cup full of water in my hand her that and snatch her keys away from her. I tell her through the door to drink the water and hold tight. We make her wait out there for an hour and a half so she can sober up. Finally open the door up again and drop the keys out and tell her to never come to my house again. She was lucky I didn't call the cops. If the roles were reversed, I would have been in jail by night's end. I feared calling the cops because all she would have to do is say he raped me or he assaulted me, and I would have been guilty until proven innocent. We didn't kiss on the only date. We didn't even hug. We paid for our own meals. It was very weird. My then wife and I had been on the outs for quite some time, so when I met a coworker at a new job, let's call her Jane, and she took an interest in me, my marriage finally teetered into the ravine. Only thing was, I didn't find out all at once that Jane was into polyamory and actually had some serious mental and addiction issues with my now in progress divorce and all the headaches that came with it. I realized I was in no position to maintain any kind of relationship, much less the kind with drama around every corner, nor did I care to. I tried breaking it off with Jane several times, but she would freak out with all kinds of "you don't just throw somebody aside" type lectures. It was pretty incessant and always wore me down. I was also wary of being falsely accused of something at work, because I began suspecting she was that vengeful if provoked. Plus she enjoyed her attempts at controlling me by making it all better with sex, and of course, to me, that was one of the few upsides to all this. I was flat out not thinking straight, and after a few breakups got reversed, I resigned myself to putting up with Jane. Who knows, maybe in the end we could both help each other, although that never happened. I was miserable, but by this point intellectually curious to see where all this was heading. At some point it finally sank in for her that our relationship just wasn't there, that I wasn't who she thought I was. She broke it off with me. I didn't bother pretending to be heartbroken. Soon after, I met someone a lot sanner and more compatible with me. Let's call her Lana. Admittedly, we also moved a little too quickly with our relationship, but things were at least going well, and we were committed to making it work. Thing is, Jane wasn't quite done with me after all. Frustrated that I wasn't groveling at her to come back to me, she would occasionally text me to check in. Curious about my new relationship, she asked if we wanted to meet up. Having heard all my crazy stories about Jane, Lana was extremely curious about meeting her, so we all met up for drinks. No problems there, but Jane later admitted that she was feeling us out to see if we'd consider returning me to a poly arrangement involving both of them. To her credit, Lana was not appalled, but highly amused. Jane would then go quiet for several months, only to eventually phone or send random texts out of the blue. She phoned me once, obviously tripping, begging me to pick her up and drive her to visit a friend in a mental hospital. By then Lana and I were the legal guardians of a 3-year-old child, and Jane tried to convince me to bring him along, that he'd be safe. Needless to say, this didn't happen. Jane was livid and hate texted me for a few hours, until she got frustrated that I didn't engage her. The final straw with her came a few months later. She blew up my phone one particular day, clearly having a drug-related breakdown, demanding I take her to a hospital. Keep in mind, she lived 30+ miles from me, and the hospital she was asking to go to was 20 miles beyond that. She had friends closer by who she cold called. Mind you, I was done with her since before we finally broke up, so I felt little to no obligation to help her, but I would still have made an effort if there was any way I could have that day. Fortunately there simply wasn't. The next day at 4 AM she called again, waking us up and leaving a voicemail. Lana woke up, grabbed my phone, and played it. Apparently Jean had checked herself into the hospital, no thanks to me, but had checked herself back out again. She now demanded that I wake up, drive 30 miles to meet her at Denny's, and drive her home. Lana was finally done being amused. She phoned her back and went ballistic on her after trading a few more text messages the following day. Amazingly, she still wasn't 100% clear on leave me the hell alone. Jane finally got the hint. Toxic woman. I wish her the best, but fully expect the worst. TL. Doctor at end. Well, I was letting an escort crash at my place. Really attractive girl, but she had some severe issues, hence the line of work. She had a substance abuse problem and was a piece of shit of a person. I knew what she did for a living to an extent, however didn't really bother getting to know her very well before telling her she could stay at my place in exchange for paying some bills. I was going through a divorce at the time, so my state of mind was fucked up, and I was drinking quite a bit. 25-year me thought this was all no problem. So first night she stay at my place, under the assumption that she and I will be roommates. I'm surprised when she and I start fooling around. Like wow, that was quick. But it ends there. No sex until the second night. I have a few drinks and we have sex. Now I'm under the impression at this point that we are roommates who occasionally sleep together between her dates. After 2 weeks of this, she starts to swear she never sleeps with these guys. Lol. Okay, so I know she's starting to get attached. She buys me an iPad out of blue. Starts telling people we are dating. Anyway, this continues for a month until I get sick of telling her that I'm 100% not interested in a relationship with her. She's a shitty person, a horrible mother. She had a kid that she only fed dried ramen with sugar on top, and she duped these poor lonely old dudes into wiring her money. So I tell her get an apartment and tfo in a nice way. I help her find one. She continues to pester me about dating. Eventually ends up threatening to have some guys kick my ass because of, well, I'm not sure why. So I tell her once and for all, get the fuck out of my life and do not contact me again. Come to find out, this bitch stole my original Wii with $100s of virtual console games while she was moving out. That hurt. Point anyway. About 2 months later she sends me a message on Facebook, dating my ex-wife's friend from high school/college at this point, saying she's pregnant and she needs cash. Point now I'm pro I don't jive with your body. But me personally, I would never support abort my own child. I'm now a dad of 3 and 1 step, except for with her. So my response was, the only correspondence I want from you regarding this is an invoice from an abortion clinic. Point never heard from her again. She did have a kid, but I don't think the timeline was correct for me. Hope not anyway. Point DL. Doctor, let an escort move in house to pay bills, sleep with her enough to where she buys me stuff and wants to date, gets turned down, steals Wii with lots of virtual console games and tries to extort fake pregnancy money from me. When I jet in my early 20s, there was a Friday/Saturday regular who would constantly hit on me, ask me out, and touch me. I rejected her every time. Started with not being interested, to not being my type, to not being her type, to whatever else I could think of to get her off my back. She would not relent. Point it doesn't help her case that she told me about her on and off boyfriend who tried to stab her, and that she wasn't attractive to me, and she wasn't my type anyway. Too into what's hot now, not what she actually likes. Anyway, I started by being nice, to being downright mean, and she never got the hint. Or maybe she did, and thought I was playing hard to get. I wasn't. She even ruined any potential hookup I could have ever had. Made any women I showed remote interest in get embarrassed and leave, and any female friends of mine who came to hang out. Point eventually, we stopped being there, and started at a different place she didn't like. She stopped coming, and was out of my life. Finally, I bumped into her some years later, and wanted to say hi just to be civil, and she threw her hand up in the air like her shit didn't stink, and I knew I was free completely at that point. I said, oh thank God, out loud, and that was the end. Point I could go into detail about the escalation from civil to downright mean, but it is not important to the story. She did hop into my car one time, uninvited, and wanted to go to my house. I said, yes, I'm going to my house, but I'm tired and going to bed. When I get home, without you in it, or out of it, you will be left outside my house, and further away than now, so it's pointless. I don't even want you in my car right now. Get out. She would not leave. So I sat there until 4 AM on a Wednesday night, until she finally got out and went home. I threatened to drive to the police station, but she said she would lie and say I kidnapped her and tried to rape her. Yes, she said that. Point funny thing is, all it took was getting a gig at a bar she didn't like for her to go away. Luckily, I never gave her my number and told everyone not to give it to her. Unfortunately, she had very cool attractive friends who I had a lot more in common with, but no chance, because she claimed dibs. All in all, I dodged that bullet. Some other dude is putting up with her shit. Hopefully not. One of the mean things I did say to her was I understood why her ex tried to stab her, and that it sucks he was unsuccessful. She laughed it off and invited me to the diner. In high school, a girl I would casually flirt with got dumped by her boyfriend and immediately thought I could be her rebound. I had a serious girlfriend in college who I cheated on all the time, so I wasn't exactly on the market. Let's not even debate my 17-year-old morals. Okay, she asks me to take her home from school one day and offers gas money, so I oblige. She invites me in, and I go in, because I had driven so far that I was going to miss UGR and Pokemon. Unacceptable. Let's not discuss why a fat nerd with acne was desired. I still don't get it. So, she offers Kool-Aid, blue, and I accept. She says she hot. I said I was comfy. She takes off her shirt. I realize what's happening and I flat ignore her and watch my show. She goes to her room and comes back wearing a tank top and PJ shorts and offers a sandwich. She skips in front of me and I know I need to leave so as to avoid any further awkward point. I tell her I'm leaving and she says, no, you are not. She sits next to me on the couch and grabs my hand and puts it inside her shirt, and I clench my fist and tell her I'm leaving again. This time through clenched teeth she says, you cannot do this to me. Touch me right now. Now. I was like, nah fam, you crazy, and I'm out. She must have taken a self-defense class because she jumped on me and pinned me in such a way that I couldn't get up, and I was a big dude at the time. She slid her PJ shorts to the side while digging her knees into my hips, so I'm like stuck to the couch. She's talking like a lunatic and mumbling to herself while unzipping my pants and tries to get me inside her. I'm freaking out, realizing that I'm being assaulted. So I'm trying to think of what would make her stop. I hear a car drive by, and I just whispered, I think your mom is here. She froze and looked suddenly very present and sound of mind. She ran to the front door, and I hop up and run up behind her and fling the door wide open, and her mom is actually right there holding her keys. I tell her mom I was leaving and she will never me again. And I dipped out. The next day at school, she spread rumors that we had unprotected sex for hours. The psycho was banking on me, hoping the ego stroke of the rumor would prevent me from reporting her. She was right. She won, and I was scared of her for years. She'd show up to my job and I'd literally hide. It took a long time for me to recover mentally from that. I was having a party over at my apartment and had a small crowd together. This girl who was a coworker and a friend was clearly into me. I'd seen the signs before, but had already told her I wasn't interested. Well, after a few shots with the group, I was sitting at my card table smoking, and she sits down next to me. We are just shooting the shit and doing a couple shots together when she ripped the cigarette out of my mouth and blew the smoke in my face. I guess she was trying to be sexy, but it just annoyed me. She ends up getting sick, and I bring her to a spare bed for her to lay down and sleep when she gets up and slams me against the wall. She started making out with me and rubbing me, and I had to push her off and tell her to fuck off. She started crying and everything, and I felt awful, but I swore to never fuck around with coworkers since one of my exes, and I don't even like to hook up when we are drunk, just to not cross boundaries. She took it personal and just started screaming at me, calling me a piece of shit. I felt uncomfortable because it was the first and only time I'd ever felt like disgusted, because she forced herself on me and literally jerked me off, and I told my friends about it because there was a huge commotion and they just laughed it off, calling me a pussy for not hooking up with her. I don't know, she wasn't like, I'm going to murder your whole family type of crazy, but she definitely had some issues going on. Context: I had just started dating my current girlfriend at this time. On vacation in Cuba, these two girls would hang out with me and my friends. One girl, who was mixed in complexion, would ask me all sorts of questions, walk me back to my hotel, etc. Anyways, one crazy night after the disco, I was extremely drunk. My friend went to the bathroom and her friend told me he had left or something, and he had my card, so I started to get worried and ran to our room. It was obviously locked, so cue me knocking on the door and no one answering. They tell me I can come to their hotel for the night and sleep on the couch. Cue me walking into her naked on the bed. Her friend just gets into the other bed and says something to the effect of, I'll just watch some TV. Don't worry about being too loud. I'm freaked out, decide to leave. The next day, she apparently told the staff I was racist for not wanting to have sex with her because of her skin color. Luckily in Cuba they are really laid back, and they all responded with if that's what he likes, who cares. Also, my girlfriend is mixed and darker than her, and she saw a picture of her when I was trying to be nice and let her down easy. Unluckily, she decides to then say that I had tried to rape her. Good thing she tried the racist thing first, and Cuba is again really laid back. They basically asked me my side and then told us to stay apart from one another. She comes up to me and basically blames me for ruining her vacation because she was now on her period and couldn't have sex on the beach. So that's the story of how a strange woman tried to have me arrested in a foreign country because I wouldn't cheat on my girlfriend. My ex. We dated for about 6 months, during which time she ended up lying about quite a few major things, like a friend of hers killing themselves while on a FaceTime call with her. I found out she was lying via notifications on her phone from the guy she allegedly just watched die, as well as a lot of small bullshit which I just couldn't understand. The whole time she'd been telling me she had this horrible disease which was going to result in an early death. so I had a lot of sympathy for her, and it made me forgive some of the lies, even the one about her friend. Big mistake. Anyway, fast forward a while, and we had a bit of an argument one day, where I made it clear that I wasn't sure what I wanted from our relationship. Her reaction to this was to then stand outside in the freezing cold having phone sex with a friend of hers, including sending nude photos via Facebook Messenger. I overheard. She came in a huff. I called her out on it. She first lied about what she was doing, even though I clearly overheard a good bit of the call. She then lied about who it was with. Then she tried to tell me that he was paying her for it. I told her to prove it. She said this dude, a stockroom worker, mind you, was paying her £1,000 to have phone sex. I just got angry at that point and kept calling her bluffs. Shit, for £1,000 you can have a fucking insane experience with some top tier girls anyway. She ended up showing me a fake PayPal transaction, which I spotted was fake from the fact it was in euros, and also because she'd used the wrong spelling of the guy's name. Then she showed me fake WhatsApp messages too. Again, you could tell they were fake from how the text fit in the box. We argued, I stormed out, and sat in the car to calm down. When I came back, she was stood over the kitchen sink with a kitchen knife in her hand, holding it over her wrist. Fuck that shit. I was out. We resolved things. My method of keeping her from doing anything fucking insane during the night, so she could get home. Then I broke things off. To top it all off, she was, and still is, clearly an alcoholic who did everything she could to hide it from her mum, but then would drink a liter of vodka to herself. She's a small girl, and shrug it off as part of her illness. Yeah, no. When I was in the army, I broke up with one girl that my friend had hooked me up with at a bar because she seemed pretty cool at first, but after the second date, when we started hanging out at her apartment more, she started to creep me out by following me everywhere she could and kept having these suicidal thoughts if I ever said even one negative thing about her, like she would fly off the rails at the slightest bit of criticism. One day after a really bad argument, because I got tired of her stressing me out, right when I said the words "we should probably see other people," she immediately quit making a sound and just stood there with a blank expression, not responding to what I said, making me think I might have broken her brain or something. So after a few seconds I pretty much said, well, okay, I'm gonna take off now, and right when I turned around to go out the door, she let out this freakishly creepy laugh, grabbed a pocket knife from the counter, and lunged after me, throwing me up against the wall and yelling, "You're not going anywhere." After spending a few minutes keeping her off me and pleading with her to stop, I made the conscious decision to grab her hand she had the knife in, after she made away, to close to cool swipe at my throat and quickly broke her wrist, which forced her to jump off me as she screamed in anguish. So I ran out of her apartment, stumbling the entire way until I could get to my phone in my car, lock myself in, and call the police. If that wasn't horrifying enough, when the cops came and saw the scratches from the knife on my face and the rips in my shirt, they walked in, put her in cuffs, and literally the entire time we were in view of each other, from the second they walked her out of her apartment to when they put her in the back of the cop car, she stared at me, giving her same creepy grin from earlier and chanting, "I'm gonna get you," in an almost inhuman voice, a vision that still haunts me 6 years later. Once they got her in, the cop's partner walked up to me and said, "We are sending her to the psych ward for evaluation. Looks like you got lucky, kid, because God knows what she could have done to you if you hadn't have called us." I never heard from her after that, and needless to say I took a break from dating for a little bit after that, because I've never, in my entire life, watched someone become completely unhinged like that before. So, I met a girl on Instagram who went to my school. That was honestly pretty much the only reason she went to my school, and I saw her with someone I knew. Therefore I'd figure I could be friends with her. Yes, friends. After a while, we finally met in real life. It was pretty harmless for a while, but I didn't really think of her as girlfriend material. I only wanted to be friends with her. She was admittedly a bit too young, weird to say, when it comes between a freshman and a junior, but whatever, and I really wasn't looking for a girlfriend, especially in high school. Not meaning to be sexist, but a lot of high school girls I've met aren't really that mature, at least in my school. Plus, high school relationships really don't last that long. Anyway, she, on the other hand, had other plans. She really wanted a boyfriend, and since I was really sweet, I was up on her interest list. It was flattering, but I just couldn't resist admitting my lack of interest in such a relationship. One night, I straight up told her the truth. The next morning, I get into a text-based argument and pissing match with her about the situation, even with my mentioned interest of being friends. Although she later accepted the friendship, I later learned more things about her. Apparently, she'd get into a lot of stupid drama. A friend of mine, who I introduced to her at one time, also had a difficult time with her. It also seemed like she was a bit of a bully. Finally, one day, after catching me talking to one of her enemies for a while, she straight up told me on Instagram, "You know, I'm not gonna be friends with you if you keep talking to her." That was literally when I stopped talking to her for a long time. Now, starting to graduate from HS, on my last official day of high school, we kinda had a little conversation. It wasn't too bad, really. Honestly, though, whether she really has changed or not, I think I'm glad to move on from her. Drama and extra BS like that really doesn't fit my list of a fun time in high school, or in life in general. More of a breakup story, but here goes. I once dated someone, and this relationship was just wrong from the very start. We also lived together for a few months, never rushed things. When I finally decided to get my act together, I told her I wanted to end things. She proceeded to trash my apartment, try to break the walls, stabbed my suitcase with a knife, then tried to stab me. I couldn't hold her down and stop her, because at that time living in Japan, while being a foreigner, I thought police wouldn't believe me if I had told them what had happened, then assumed I was the culprit for domestic abuse. Fortunately, I was finally able to end things. That wasn't as violent as this time point, but the story doesn't end there. A month after I got my act together and found someone else who turned out to be better, she waited outside my house and kept ringing the door while I was trying to sleep. Being winter and there was no train for her to go back home, combined with me being an idiot trying to do the right thing, I let her in so she could stay for the night and then have her leave the morning after. Except it didn't quite roll out that way. She didn't let me sleep and kept trying to talk to me. When morning came, she proceeded to cry for several hours, screaming and stuff. Luckily, I'm friends with her mum, so I text her when I had the chance so she can come and pick her up. Hours later she arrives, and the girl is pissed that her mum is here to take her away. She cries even more and screams while her mum is holding her back, and I leave to go to work. After I finished work, I'm left with peace and quiet. That was a few years ago. I'm now happily with someone much better. Without even going into too much detail, my first serious girlfriend repeatedly made up stories about her being kidnapped and raped by someone who didn't like that I was with her, and it all culminated in me contacting the police and finding out that she was just chilling in her room the whole time. Her justification was that we had run out of things to talk about, but that she really liked me and wanted things to carry on. I don't know if that makes her crazy. I'm not a fan of that term, but it definitely fucked me up. A lot of the things she said and did, like constantly making me feel like I had to work to win her trust, and the little tests she used to put me through, like telling me she was going to move away or cheat on me, made for a really difficult year. On top of everything else going on with my life and dealing with my own mental health issues. At this stage in my life, I don't know how 15-year-old me handled all of that and didn't actually end it all. But I really thought I was in love, and, at the time, I suppose I had the patience to put up with it all. Part of me sometimes thinks it would now be nice to sit down with her and have a normal conversation. I still think that is a chapter of my life that is unresolved. People always say things like, if you think a woman is bad, look at her man, and I always worry in my relationships and conduct now that I was doing something wrong. I'd like to hear her perspective. So my freshman year of college, I got set up with a girl by some mutual friends. I thought she was your average artsy college girl at first. We dated for a few weeks, and over a bit of time I come to figure out she has more than a few screws loose, to put it mildly. So being able to see that this is not going to work out, I decide to end things before they get very serious, and we can still stay friends. so we hang out most of the night where I break things off, and while she is sad she seemed to take it okay. She drops me off at my apartment at around 6 am, as I have a class at 8 am, freshman mistakes, so I have enough time to shower, change and head to class. As I'm in the shower she walks into my apartment, goes into the bathroom and starts screaming at me while I'm washing my hair. "I love you, I can't live without you. You know the drill." I basically lose my shit, scream at her about breaking into my place, yelling at someone while they are in the bathroom, etc. My roommates, whom already didn't like me, really didn't appreciate it either. She proceeded to fuck several of my friends over the next year, I assume in a ill-conceived plan to make me jealous and or get me back. I hadn't talked to her in over a decade when she reached out of the blue and apologized for everything that had happened back then. She had gotten on medication, had a bunch of therapy, and is much better now. She got married a few years ago, so I guess things ended well for her. We had been seeing each other for around 2 weeks. She decided to go to a party I decided to stay in and get some rest. She called me at 1 in the morning after I'd been asleep for a few hours and then drunkenly began to ramble about how much she loved me and couldn't wait to get married and buy a house and have some cats. I stopped talking to her that evening. She got crazy by stalking me around base. I was in the Air Force at the time and began texting me crazy, maybe suicidal notes. On top of all this, she started trying to tell me that she was definitely pregnant and it was definitely mine despite only having had sex once and probably too early for it to be detected. In any case, I met someone much better. In fact, I married them. And much to the surprise of no one, she had been lying the entire time about pregnancy. She continued to stalk me around until one time at the chow hall she saw me with my then fairly new girlfriend, walked up, insulted me, called my new girlfriend a slut and then left. That was the last time I spoke to or heard from her. To clarify, we hadn't been going on dates, we'd only been having casual sex. I had no intention of staying with her. She was just hot enough for me to want to fuck her, but her personality was about as vivid and inspiring as a piece of dried grass. A final note, in the military safe sex is something drilled into your head. I knew even as an 18-year-old how to properly use a condom. A couple of years ago, I dated this 22-year-old. I use that term lightly because we went on 3 dates, multiple red flags. She assured me that even though she came from a high-class family, she was unlike all the spoiled sorority girl stereotypes that she proceeded to list out. She was claimed not to judge people. She did. She was living with a friend until she could find her feet and bitched about said friend non-stop. Bitched about people on the street. Bitched about gay-looking people. Third date came as a surprise since it was her work's night out that she forgot to mention. She also forgot to mention I'd be the only other guy there apart from her lecherous 50-something boss. After the third date, I dropped her off home. All through the ride she was pawing at me and asking to be taken home. That is my place. I just let the cab drive to her place. Lots of bargaining later, I walked back to my house. I got home and hear someone say, "Hey, it's her." She'd been telling me since I dropped her off. She claims that now that she knows where I live, I have to invite her in. I'll admit my fault. I'll let her in. And I stuck my dick in the figurative. Crazy. She literally squatted in my house till got her friend to help get her home. Thinking back, I don't think she was crazy, just young and strange. I met her 2 years later and she said she'd been to some place in Africa, taught kids and had matured a lot. She hadn't. I didn't drop her home this time. When I was in high school, a girl I rejected once called my house. She told me she had decided to kill herself because I don't love her, had taken a bottle of pills and other shit, was in the bath and just wanted to say bye before the pills overtook her completely. She was talking all slurry and weird. This was before cell phones. Yeah, I'm of advanced years. I didn't know this girl. I didn't know anyone who knew her. Didn't even know anyone who could contact her through 6 degrees of separation. I tried to talk her into getting help from someone in the house. Tried everything I could think of. Tried until she passed out on the phone. Sure, I thought she might be faking it, but still the longest, scariest night of my life. A few months later, I was at a party. Lots of booze going around despite it being an under 18s party. Half the sitter's kids were there. At some point a girl I know comes up to me saying I have to come quick. This, same as phone incident, girl has been raped, is inconsolable and is asking for my help. I get there, and half the party has heard this girl has been raped, and there's a huge crowd around her all asking her who did this to her and ready to beat the hell out whoever it was. I get there and start trying to talk to her, and she's just drunk and sobbing like crazy. At one point I ask her, why are you crying? And between the sobs she finally responds, because of you. At that point I immediately realize that 1, she's just got the drunk sobs about me rejecting her, and 2, this whole crowd is still under the impression she was raped, and she just pointed at me and proclaimed me as the reason she's so inconsolable. It took like 40 minutes of the hardest explaining and smooth talk imaginable to get the crowd to understand that I did not rape this girl and that she was talking about other unhappiness while she was still sobbing so drunkenly she couldn't even really talk. I've never seen that many people look at me with murder in their eyes ever before, and fortunately never again. My experience happened around 9 years ago when I was 19. I was a virgin at this point and had never had a girlfriend. No girls seemed to show any interest in me. My kind nature, desperation, and inexperience played a major role in what happened to me. It was my second summer working at an amusement park fast food restaurant. There I met a goofy lively girl. I started flirting with her, and eventually we hung out together and started dating and having sex, which is a big thing for a teen in an society. At some point she confessed to me that she had been having some quite depressing thoughts, even including thinking about self-harm. Being a naive teen, I thought that I would save her and tried to support her best as I could. Well, she started having panic attacks and really bad episodes where she told me she would kill herself. I adamantly tried to support her, even calling suicide helplines to get some support. Turns out they are fucking useless and don't know how to handle these situations. Then at some point Essie started threatening me about killing herself if we don't move in together. At this point I still thought to myself that I could help her and just calmed her down, not agreeing to her demand. At one point I was hanging out with her at her place and I told I would go see my mom. This made her furious. How could I leave her and go meet my mom all of a sudden? She threw a proper fit, took a knife, and said she would slash her wrists if I went out the door. Again I calmed her down, which was not easy. When she was calm I offered her to take her dog out for a walk, which she agreed to. I went out and called the police saying that my girlfriend, can't believe I used that word, was trying to self-harm. I also called her mother and told about the situation. Her mom didn't seem too surprised. I went back inside and told her I called the cops and her mom. This made her go crazy. She started screaming and crying that I ruined her life. Now everybody will know that she's crazy. She was much more aggressive and scary than before and told me that I have to call the cops off. After some arguing I did call the cops and told them they needn't come. Surprisingly they just said okay and that was it. Finally her mother arrives. To my surprise her mom seemed more annoyed than concerned, but she ended up taking her back home. Some time passes and I get a message or call from the girl saying how she's much better and she would like for me to come over and talk this out. I foolishly agree and head over. When I get there she actually seems much better. We talk for a while and start watching a movie. We end up fucking. Can't believe what I was thinking. And then at some point the shit starts again. She told me she would kill herself if I leave, actually blocking the door. She also told me she would call the cops and tell them I raped her if I forcibly tried to move her from the door. We argue for a while. She spits in my face. Finally I get her to calm down. I wait for her to fall asleep and I dfo. At some point she wakes up and starts calling me. I don't answer. Then she texts me a bunch of threats which I ignore. This goes on for a day or so, after which it stopped. I never heard from her since. The things that happened were actually more nuanced in real life and there were many incidents I left out. I bet many of you are thinking, how could you let this happen? As I said in the beginning, it is due to me not having any experience with girl. The prospect of sex makes a young man's mind cloudy. To my nature I'm also a very kind and caring person and I couldn't just leave such an emotional wreck by herself. This in turn is a direct result of a lack of a proper male role model. Dad lacked balls, mom was over nurturing. Now in hindsight I can see that I was horribly emotionally abused. I hope no one has to go through the same shit. As an advice to young men, try to get lots of experiences with women early on so that you won't cling on to the first person who shows interest in you. Know your self-worth. Be picky. There will come other opportunities. Latest I heard, the girl started studying to be a teacher, which is an university degree here, and they have some quite rigorous aptitude testing. It's not surprise she got in being such a sociopathic manipulator. I hope she doesn't scar any malleable minds for life.